look at other suggestions, but she put forward something that
Neither
should
of whom
happen.
are Liberal Democrats.
No, indeed. But for all the ugly scenes that you've seen in our parliament over the course of the last year in particular, and it certainly hasn't shrouded itself in glory, some of the silver lining has been what's happened behind the scenes. And I've certainly been involved in efforts that I've never been involved in previously, where you've seen MPs work across those party lines. The backbenches of parties come together in that national interest. And we got very, very close in the last parliament, just 10 MPs away. And in fact, some votes in the last few months have been won and lost by one MP. And certainly there's one example where the chair had to cast a presiding vote. But you've seen MPs work in that national interest rather than the party interest. And I just float that. I'm not saying that's definitely going to happen, and who knows what the numbers are. And certainly the projections at the moment, again, show us, we'll see us having a majority Conservative government. But there certainly conceivably could be an alternative where you see MPs coming together for a government of national unity.
Okay, please, with a raise of hands, if you have a question, we will... is there a roaming microphone? Yep. So the young lady there in the middle with the black polo, roll neck, whatever you call those things these days. That's it.
Hello, my name's Nicole.
Hi, Nicole.
I'm a student, and you briefly mentioned the climate emergency, and that's obviously something that lots of students are worried about. So I was wondering how you'd tackle that, and also what your thoughts are on Boris Johnson not being bothered to come to the debate last week.
Well, I think it was appalling that the Prime Minister wouldn't come to that debate. And I note that Ofcom has thrown out the Conservative Party's complaint that the Channel 4 went ahead with that debate. And absolutely right that they went ahead with that debate to discuss the greatest issue of the day, facing us as a country and us as a planet. And as a party, the Liberal Democrats have put front and centre the issue of tackling our climate emergency, because we do think it's the greatest issue we face as a nation.
Why did Michael Gove turn up?
So Michael Gove turned up with his own...
Instead of Boris Johnson.
Michael Gove turned up with his own film crew to essentially create a piece of propaganda that was put on his website to say that, I wanted to be here and, I can take part in this debate. He turned up with Boris Johnson's dad as well. The combination of which, was absolutely right. It was a leaders' debate. It was for leaders to participate, and it's appalling that Boris Johnson wouldn't participate in that debate on the greatest issue.
Nicole, do you feel that answered your question?
No. I haven't answered the question.
There's more, right? Okay. I'm just conscious we're.
But it's a really thank you so much for raising it, because this is another one of those issues, and it's in fact the most important issue. When it comes to this is about future generations, it's about my children, it's about all of our future generations in this country. This is one of those issues that we haven't been afforded the time and the space to tackle as a country because of Brexit. And I regret that enormously. And actually, by way of us not being in the European Union, we'll be even less able to contend with it. But in terms of what we've put forward as a party and the difference that I would make personally, it's something that I'm very, very passionate about. And in fact, in Finchley and Golders Green, it's one of the 60 Unite to Remain constituencies, which is where the Liberal Democrats and the Green Party and Plaid in Wales have worked together not to stand candidates against each other. I only regret the fact that the Labour Party refused to take part in even the discussions around that. But where we find ourselves is that the Green Party have balloted their members locally and decided not to run a candidate. And that's in part due to the work that I personally have done on this issue. So I was the former Shadow Minister for Energy and Climate Change, and I brought forward an amendment to the Energy Bill back in 2011, which saw the introduction of a green apprenticeship scheme in this country. So I think it's absolutely vital, and I'm really, really proud to be part of a party that does prioritise this. We've put forward a 100-day plan. We said that this should be the responsibility of the Treasury. We want to reinstate the Department for Energy and Climate Change, which the Tories took away. We think this should be the responsibility of everyone. Now, locally, we sit in an area that has its council, Barnet Council. Barnet Council is one of the few councils in London that has not declared a climate emergency. There are people sat in the council that do not believe that there is climate change. This is the council, I live here locally, and perhaps people in this room, you will see that brown bin that should be collecting our food waste, and it isn't. We have some of the worst recycling rates, and they're about to start charging to collect green waste. And there's so much that can and should be done in this very borough to make a difference. And certainly if I'm returned as the MP, this is one of the areas that I'll be doing a lot of work on, because I won't be of the same political persuasion as the leadership of the council, and I will be holding them to account. And that might be via a carrot, it might be via a stick, but certainly, whether it's on the issue of recycling, there's many people locally that want to have an electric vehicle, But if you don't have a drive, then you can't have an electric vehicle charging point. And there's some communal ones, but they break all the time, and there certainly isn't enough of them. We should be having those. It's on the few areas locally that didn't apply to the Mayor's Clean Air Fund. And I certainly see the effects of the air pollution that is around us all. And on the national level, as a party, we've said every local authority in the country should have the responsibility and the resources to be delivering on our national targets when it comes to our emissions. That isn't what happens at the moment. At the moment, we've got the Climate Change Committee. They set our targets nationally. Every local area reports on its emissions, but we don't hold them to account to actually make a difference. We've said that every area should make a difference. And even without that law, there's certainly much that I can do to hold them account to do so.
There was obviously a lot more to say on that, but I'm going to get to other questions as well. Thank you, Nicole. Let's see, with a raise of hands. I will, of course, try and prioritise if I sense you're a student, and that's generally by how young you look. So there's a chap here with glasses. Yep, and I imagine you're a student. You are, yes? Yes.
Well, some people say I talk like I'm 80.
Yes.
My name's Ben, I'm 16. My question is regarding the Lib Dems manifesto talking on a regulated cannabis market. Why do you see this as, in your opinion, what do you think of this?
So we've looked at evidence of other countries, particularly America and Canada, that in certain states have introduced this. And certainly, in terms of police time locally, a lot of police time is taken up with contending with cannabis. And what we aren't actually, too much distraction and energy has gone into contending, particularly with personal use of cannabis, when what we're not doing is tackling the criminal gangs. And what we're not doing is able to regulate or do anything to take off the very strong forms of cannabis, in particular skunk, that are on our streets. And certainly many young people and parents have raised with me the very serious issue of people accessing skunk and the impact that could have. So we've said for over 18s, we think there should be a regulated market. We've certainly seen, looking at that evidence of other countries, where it can make a big difference, not to have, I forget the exact figures, but there are certainly hundreds of people in our prisons that are there because of personal use. And actually you could better direct resources and efforts to be able to take off the streets the kind of cannabis that is there at the moment, which is causing the greatest harm, because we think that we advocate a harm reduction approach, and that's certainly, at the moment it's a criminal justice approach, and that doesn't tackle the issue. So for all those reasons, that's the proposal we put forward.
So if the Conservative Party is to be known as the party of cocaine, will the Liberal Democrats be known as the party of cannabis?
The Liberal Democrats will be known as the party of regulated cannabis, and actually tackling the issue that is not being contended with at the moment, which is the potency of what people access through an unregulated market, which is causing and having a very, very serious consequence, particularly for young people in this country.
Have you ever inhaled?
I have not, no.
That's actually an honest... Thank you for a straightforward answer. Yeah. I just think that politicians often, when it comes to that question, don't give straightforward answers. And it's good to have somebody that hasn't. I mean, if you had, I would have appreciated an honest answer the other way around as well. Those gummies in LA are quite... we haven't had a question on this side, so can we get... Yes, gentleman at the back there. Is there a possibility to get a microphone to him? And also, I'll take one more because of time. I'll take another question as well, and we'll try and bunch them up so we can get through them.
My name is Nick Coach, and I'm a journalist and writer. I want to know two things, really. One is, have you ever encountered anti-Semitism from amongst your ranks in the Labour Party of MPs or ministers? No. And secondly, what percentage of the Labour Party members would you say were anti-Semitic?
So the second, she answered the first one by saying no. The second one, what percentage of the party members, did you ask, do you think are anti-Semitic? Before you answer that, let's take another question from this side as well. Anyone on this side? Yes, the young lady there in the black. If we can get a microphone to her. Yes, just in front of you. Yes, just in front of you. That's it. Yes.
Hi, I'm a parent of the school and I live locally.
Still a young lady.
I am, yes. Just wanted to ask, I know you talk about anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. Is it restricted only to the Labour Party? I will find that really difficult to believe that it isn't.
Okay, so that's actually related to the other question as well.
Yeah.
So I think we judge parties by how they contend with any form of racism within their ranks. And certainly I held the Labour Party to a higher bar because one of its core values was about tackling anti-racism, or being anti-racist or tackling racism.
That's not unreasonable, is it? I mean, it's like saying you expected the Labour Party to be pro-feminist, right?
Sure.
And you didn't necessarily expect the Conservatives to be pro-feminist, which is why I imagine you joined Labour when you were younger.
Absolutely. I mean, I joined a party that was, that wore the badge of equality very proudly and changed laws in this country and moved the goalposts.
I mean, someone like Boris Johnson, for example, has a record of making racist comments and actually being overtly racist, and he is the leader of a party, actually he's the Prime Minister. I find that really, really strange that it's been allowed to happen, and no one seems to talk about that at all.
I mean, I certainly have. The questions I've responded to, but thank you for raising. Of course, not of course, and we shouldn't have any racism within our country, and certainly we see it in all political parties. But how I judge political parties is how they then deal with it, and certainly the party that I left behind has not dealt with it, and despite my very best efforts, did not deal with it. I was formerly the parliamentary chair of the Jewish Labour Movement. And I spent an extraordinary amount of time trying to tackle this issue from within. I was formerly as I was a parliamentary chair, I in fact stood up in Parliament Square where we had this extraordinary demonstration, the Enough is Enough demonstration, an extraordinary event for any minority community in this country to take to Parliament Square, not to demonstrate against the far right or some extreme unit, but against Her Majesty's opposition, the party of which I was a part. And even then, last February, March, I still said, I called on people to join me, to try and tackle it from within. I'm all for a fight if I think that there's something that I can change, and that's certainly what I endeavoured to do, but I only saw it got worse. And I only saw it got worse after countless motions and meetings, and I spoke out in the press and media, and we heard recordings surface of what was happening in private meetings. I met the new General Secretary. I put forward 19 different things for her to consider about what could be done to make a difference, and it only got worse. And there comes a moment at which, I'm all for being in the tent if you can change it, but the moment at which it gets worse, in my view, I could no longer be a part of it. And also, I judge the party on how it holds people to account. So of course, any membership organisation cannot be expected to know everyone's history and what they may or may not have posted on their social media 5-10 years ago. Or even in recent years. You can't have those vetting procedures when you've got membership organisations of over 100,000. The Labour Party is over 500,000. But certainly if it's brought to your attention, I expect the Labour Party to deal with it. And I do hold that party to a higher bar because it's supposed to be an anti-racist party.
I should say at this stage that it's precisely for what you raised, madam, when I was young. And I don't want to make allegations about today because it's not my place to in this format, though I have done on my radio show. Listen to that. Saturday and Sunday, 12 to 3.
What time was it?
LBC, 12 to 3.
12 to 3. I didn't hear what you said.
But growing up, it's the reason I didn't join the Conservatives and have never voted Conservative. So what I would say to you is, what you've said there doesn't surprise me. It would surprise me if Labour turned like that. And I think that's Luciana's point, that actually we weren't expecting that to happen to Labour. I was facing what Stephen Lawrence was facing in Essex. A year before the murder of Stephen Lawrence, I was stabbed at in the streets by Combat 18 neo-Nazis, and many of my friends were actually stabbed. Dan Legon, Michael Giddings was hit around the head with a hammer. Another friend of mine had an iron bar put to his head, and we were running away from these racists on a regular basis. One man in particular who stood to defend me between me and the racists was stabbed multiple times all over his body. And I recently put out an appeal to be reunited with him, and he responded to the appeal in the Echo, the Essex local newspaper. So I think the point is that's probably we weren't expecting the Conservatives they've improved, but we weren't expecting Labour to become that as well. I think that's really the issue here. But thank you for your question.
Let me put on record, just to be very clear, because I haven't perhaps had the opportunity to answer that very important point, that racism, wherever it rears its ugly head, is wrong. And as a country that did move the goalposts, that does see very robust equality legislation, we should hold people to account, and that includes the Prime Minister. And they should equally be contending with the issue of Islamophobia within the Conservative Party ranks, and it's appalling that they haven't committed to doing that independent inquiry. I should say that in the wake of my departure, and in answer to the first question, the fact is that today, the Labour Party is now subject to a statutory investigation by the Equalities and Human Rights Commission, the very body that the Labour Party itself created. And the last time that the Equalities and Human Rights Commission instigated that process, the threshold, you can't just go to them, knock on the door, say, I'd like an inquiry, please. There's an evidentiary threshold to initiate it. And the last time it was done into a political party was into the BNP. I am sickened at the fact that that threshold has been reached for them to initiate that sort of investigation to the Labour Party today. And so I don't know what the exact number is. I certainly know that I myself have received and have been copied into hundreds of complaints that have gone into the Labour Party. And I listened very closely to the BBC Panorama programme, where we heard firsthand from those very brave whistleblowers, people that worked in the Labour Party, who themselves were privy to the complaints that were being made from people right across the country. And the fact that you have Labour candidates standing at this election, the records of which are there for all to see about what they have posted on their social media, which happens to be anti-Semitic, and those candidates haven't been removed, in the way that there was a Lib Dem candidate that was found to have done the same, who was removed within half an hour. Again, I hold the party to a bar, and I'm appalled that they've allowed those candidates to continue to be candidates at this election.
Right, I've got 5 or 6 minutes left, so let's try and whip through questions if we can. We've got some on this side now we can go back to. So there's a chap at the back there with Harry Potter look on his face. Yes, there is. We get a question to him.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Ruben. I'm a student here at Rampton, and we've talked a lot about extremism today. And I was just wondering, isn't extremism by its definition only kind of defined by who's in power at a given time? For example, an extreme opinion here would be considered normal in a different country, or maybe 20 years ago in this country. So how is it possible to combat something that we don't have a fixed definition for?
Sure. And let's go through some more questions as well.
The guy in front.
Yep, just in front of you, if you pass the microphone to him.
Hi, I'm also a student. I'm Zaid. So, like a lot of people probably in this room, I'm quite terrified at the prospect of a Labour government under Corbyn. So why shouldn't I vote Conservative as a tactical vote rather than Lib Dem?
Okay. And I think there was a gentleman behind you. Yes, we'll take a... Indeed. Please grab the microphone.
Sorry. I'm Stephen, I'm a lawyer, I'm afraid to say. And my question is about Brexit, a very specific question. Rather than emphasise or evoke, would you not be better off emphasising that come June next year, if we haven't taken the decision to extend the transitional period, we are going to drop out, as you've said? That's something that I think you haven't emphasised sufficiently, and I suspect a lot of people don't recognise that that is in fact the reality of the situation.
Okay, so extremism, and then tactical voting and revoke versus...
Was it Stephen?
Yes. The last question.
Yeah.
So remind us of your name, sir.
Stephen Cross.
So on the last question, Stephen, I mean, we've heard it just from Dominic Raab, I believe today, where he has confirmed that there's every prospect of us as a country crashing out still with no deal. And that's, on every single front, that will have catastrophic consequences. I've sat for the last 3.5 years on the Health and Social Care Select Committee, and just what it will mean for our ability as a country to provide health and social care services is very, very serious. So we will, I've certainly talked about it, and I'll take that back, that obviously more of us have to speak more. The fact that Dominic Raab has today confirmed that that's certainly a potential consequence is very, very serious, and people do need to be made aware of it. I mean, I've certainly talked about it in the context of also this idea that we will get Brexit done. I reiterate it's an important point. We're not going to get Brexit done.
But just to ask one supplementary, I think everyone thinks we will just get to December and it will be fine. But of course, that's not the case, because we won't be a member state any longer. And therefore, we're not going to be in a position at a later date to get the extension. And I don't think that message is getting across.
Okay, question mark.
Sure. Yep. I mean, we're certainly, we've secured a number of extensions, but we're not guaranteed. We're not guaranteed any future extensions. We had a few already. Sorry,
Is that your hair?
I don't know.
Okay, yes. I would pull the hair away from your microphone, but that might look suspect. So there we are. That's better. It's good. Can we move to the tactical voting and the extremism question? How do you define extremism, and why should we not tactically vote in this area?
So, I share your concern. I share your very serious concern. It's why I left the Labour Party. It's why I stood in front of the country in February and said I could no longer be part of the Labour Party. Why I couldn't, in good faith, at any future general election, knock on doors and say, vote for me, and by extension, get Jeremy Corbyn in number 10. I do not believe he is fit in any way, shape or form to be Prime Minister, and that includes the merry band of people that are around him, for lots of different reasons, whether it's on the issue of anti-Semitism, on the issue of Brexit, on the issue of our economy, on the issue of national security, and countless other reasons. He is not fit to be in number 10. And certainly, as someone who has been very outspoken, that is a position that I very, very firmly hold dear, and that I would not in any way do anything to contend with it. I mean, it's my red line. I've been very, very clear that that's my red line. I wouldn't 8 months later do anything that would break that red line. I mean, there will be people that will be tactically voting for lots of different reasons at this election. I would also ask you to look at, a point that I made about having MPs in this next House of Commons that are prepared to stand up in the national interest to make that difference. That's certainly the record that I stand on at this election. I have not been lobby fodder, as some MPs are sadly referred to. And part of the reason we find ourselves in such a serious situation as the country is because there have been MPs on all sides that have put their party before the country. Many MPs that have put their fingers in their ears and their heads in the sand, many of whom that are running at this general election who privately say that they don't believe either Boris Johnson or Jeremy Corbyn are fit to be leaders of their parties, but they feel their parties gravitated towards the extremes, but they're hedging their bets on the fact that their party won't win this general election and they think they might be able to pick up the pieces afterwards. I think that's morally reprehensible. I think the bystanders in this last parliament on both sides have a lot to answer for. And it's going to be really, really important about the kind of MPs that we have in the House of Commons, particularly as the current prospects show that if we do have this Tory majority, as every poll indicates, then we're going to have MPs in this next House of Commons that are going to advocate for the closest possible relationship with our European friends. And that's certainly the experience that I would bring.
On the extremism question,
yes.
if I may supplement it as well, that there's a way of looking at this in which what's called the overtime window shifts. So are the parameters of debate shifting, including the idea of what is extremism, but a bit like a boiling frog in water, have we become so engulfed in this that it's no longer news? I mean, Jeremy Corbyn saying Jews don't get irony or Zionists don't get irony was big news when it was first revealed. If he had said the equivalent today after everything else that's happened, I don't think it would be headline news at all, because are we becoming somehow acclimatized to the shift in this public discourse to a point where we're now almost expecting intolerance to occur?
Well, certainly the sounds have shifted, and they've shifted in the wrong direction. And again, that's why it's going to be really important that we have as many people on the pitch in that next House of Commons that are going to defend those things that we hold dear, whether it's the battles against extremism or the battles against racism, or the battles for the future of this country when it comes to Brexit, or the battles when it comes to protecting our climate and the planet.
Say something about the definition as well.
Yeah, I mean, there is an issue in terms of what people's perceptions are. Certainly things have shifted. We've got a job to do, but certainly we do now have laws in this country where we can hold people to account. And I certainly, there certainly has been outliers, but on the whole, I think our legislation does mean that we can hold people to account when they espouse extremist views or they carry out very, very serious acts.
All I'll add to this is actually, I think it's a good thing because, like racism, the definition also shifts. It should shift with our cultural shift in how we begin to understand these topics, and that's actually part of the flexibility. It's an ongoing debate. I'm going to take one last question. I'm conscious we haven't had a question from somebody who has been overtly, say, pro-Brexit or overtly pro a different candidate. And if you, obviously, politely, if you would like this opportunity to speak, don't feel intimidated. Because when I ask for a show of hands, I realise actually you may feel like you're outnumbered.
For someone that hasn't asked, perhaps a different...
Somebody who hasn't asked a question yet. So you don't feel outnumbered, don't feel like anyone's going to gang up, and you feel free to voice...
Maybe we'll make it the penultimate question as well.
Of course. Sure. So we don't end on that note. But is there anyone like that, or sort of fits that description? There's a gentleman here, looking very stern.
Hello, my name's Adam Labor. I'm a writer. Don't you think that the consequence of not delivering Brexit in terms of social cohesion will be worse than the economic consequences of Brexit itself, if indeed those consequences are as bad as everyone says they're going to be?
Okay. In a nutshell, no. I don't think they'll be as bad. I think the prospect of people losing their jobs and being able to provide for themselves and their families in this country, when it comes to people's livelihoods, that's going to have a very, very significant impact. And certainly, I don't think there can be anything better than actually, anything more democratic than taking back the terms of the deal to the country and asking if that is, in fact, what they want.
But why do we need to have another referendum? We've already had one, and the result was 52% in favour of leaving.
Okay, so that's your second question. She'll answer that, but then we'll also take another one to finish off.
In response to that, certainly, again, I meet some of that 52% every day, and I listen very closely to what people say. And people that did vote to leave today feel that they didn't have the information. We all didn't have the information. We only know today what a deal looks like. Certainly, in terms of whether it's because people thought we were going to have more money for the NHS, that wasn't the case, or whether people voted to leave because we were going to take back control, they're still going to be subject to EU legislation, and we're not going to have a space at the table to inform that EU legislation. So there's very many things that, even if promises and pledges were made in good faith, that today look very, very different 3.5 years on. And in fact, Theresa May's deal wasn't Brexity enough for Boris Johnson, and Boris Johnson's deal wasn't Brexity enough for Nigel Farage. We find ourselves in a very, very imperfect situation. And certainly I think that in the same way that we give informed consent if we have an operation, we're furnished with the information and we give our signature at the very last moment, that 3.5 years on, we can't expect things to stand still. People do change their minds.
Okay, so being a snappy addresser as I am, I'm going to go to somebody whose jacket I've just noticed over there, because it looks wonderfully flowery. The lady with, the flowers, yes, that's it, that's right, yeah. Nice colours on your jacket. So, or is it a cardigan? It's nice, whichever one. We'll have a question from you, and that I think I have, if I've understood correctly, this has to be the last question, because we are tight at time.
Well, the penultimate question is actually, is Hugh Grant as good looking as he is in the pictures? And the real question is, so as regards to Brexit, I voted pro-Brexit because, first of all, Theresa May tried to get rid of terrorists and the European Union stopped us and they said it was against the terrorists' human rights. And I want to know, what about my human rights to live in this country in peace? I also feel that having some unelected bureaucrat from Europe telling British people how much tax they've got to pay to Europe, that bothered me a lot. I'd rather have our elected government doing that.
So what was the question, sorry?
You're right. Sorry. So my question is, would you rather have unelected bureaucrats governing this country from Europe in their very posh palace that costs billions of pounds? And whilst I agree with you that we weren't given all the information, and I'm a GP and I'd love the NHS to get 3 million because there's lots of problems. But I honestly don't see having Europe governing us better than what we can do ourselves.
So unelected bureaucrats.
I think I mentioned it, but I'll repeat if I didn't, or say it if I haven't, that I don't think the European Union is perfect. I certainly think that we need to see reform within the European Union, but I'm very bothered at the prospect of us leaving and still being subject to many European rules and legislation without being able to inform or influence it. And I think that's a far worse situation than being in it. On the issue about security, I mean, there is so much that we're going to lose by not being part of the European Union. We won't have access to the European arrest warrant. And certainly when it comes to finding those terrorists, we're going to find ourselves in a much stickier situation being able to do so. And that bothers me immensely as well. And your point, if I can come to the first point about
human rights. Yeah, I was going to prompt you on the human rights point as well. Do you think we need to adjust our human rights rule? Are you happy with it? And so on and so forth.
I mean, largely I am happy with it. I mean, we can agree to disagree, but I think as it currently stands, I think in terms of the human rights protections that we have today that we didn't have previously, I think there's always outliers and things that are imperfect, but certainly I find ourselves in a better situation today than we have done previously.
But then you've got terrorists who are now stabbing in the street because their human rights to be released from prison after serving half their sentence.
That's an additional question. So I think I probably have to stop it there. I'm very glad, though, that I did ask for...
but he was born here, wasn't he?
Sorry?
Was the person that was responsible for those acts, he was born here?
He was born here, so you couldn't deport him anyway. And also, I think that's unrelated to human rights. It was actually about sentencing and serving his full sentence or not, and indeterminate sentences and half sentences and tariffs and being released on tariff.
I'll answer the first question about Hugh Grant.
Yeah, all right.
If you're about to finish, I didn't answer that question.
Yes, please. I imagine it's a one-word answer. So.
No, I was going to reflect on the very important reason why Hugh Grant came to Finching Golders Green. And people were very struck, and people were delighted to have him knock on their doors. It was a big surprise. But Hugh Grant was here because he's worried about the future of our country.
And he was campaigning here specifically because he wants this constituency to vote for Remain.
Yeah. So on tactical voting, he was here to encourage people to, if they want to remain MP, then for tactical voting reasons, then
I've got to hand the floor back to Bernard. But what I'm going to say before I do, I was about to say I'm glad I did ask for dissenting voices as well, because I don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable that they didn't have an opportunity to speak. And so thank you all, and it's been a wonderfully civil evening, and I hope everyone's better informed of one of your candidates as well. So thank you all from me, from Luciana, from Berger.
say, I think we've had some great questions from the audience, including from several of our students who I feel very proud of their really good, thoughtful questions.
Absolutely.
And a wonderful conversation, so I'd really like to thank you.
Thank you.
But before, I did threaten to ask you a question.
You did, yes, you did. Thank you.
And as I said, as you know, that's a really important issue that has changed dramatically in schools in the past 10 to 15 years. And I just want to know your thoughts on that. I know it's an important part of your Liberal Democratic Manifesto. I'd just really like to know your thoughts about that change and what really should be done in terms of research.
Yes, I mean, this is something that I've campaigned on in Parliament for the last 6 years. And certainly as a country, we've made quite a bit of progress when it comes to talking about mental health. It doesn't have the same stigma or discrimination attached to it that it did previously, although we're not there yet. We've still got some way to go in terms of our journey, and particularly for older generations, there's still that stigma that certainly surfaces. What's really important if someone comes forward, that they're then able to access the support that they need. And having a GP in the room, you will know about the lengthy delays and waits there are for your patients to access mental health services, and particularly here locally around child and adolescent mental health services, where the waits are extraordinary. 14 weeks for an assessment, and that's if you've met the threshold. We see thresholds getting further out of reach, where in some places, young people are having to attempt to take their lives before they get into services, and too often GPs are saying that they're reaching for the prescription pad, metaphorically, because that the waits are too long, or we know that talking therapies can make such a great difference. So as a party, nationally, we've said that we do want to tackle mental health with the same urgency that we do physical health. We have mental health, we have physical health, they should be treated in the same way. And I led the campaign in 2012 to get parity of esteem for mental health written into the Health and Social Care Act. It's written in law, but we are so far from having that delivered. So as a party, we've said we want to have proper waiting time standards. When it comes to young people at the moment, there's such a challenge where you get into services, you get that assessment, but then still, if you get the treatment, you're then having to go into adult services at 18, you face that cliff edge. And you have to start your journey all over again. You have to repeat your story. As a party, we've said it should go to 25, so that young people don't have that breaks in their support. We've said that,
which is coincidentally when the male brain fully matures. Right. The female brain matures earlier, right. So that's a good age, actually, 25.
Yeah. There's many things that we could be making, where we could be making difference. And certainly, again, we think about it very much as a country in terms of our NHS and our health services. But again, I come back to one of the themes I raised earlier, prevention. There's so much more we can and should be doing as a country to keep people both physically well and mentally well. It starts with the under fives and supporting new mums and dads. It's what happens in our youth services and in our places of education. Is what happens, social media. There's many different things that have an impact. We've got a massive issue locally where people that are living by themselves, the issue of loneliness is having a massive impact as well. Befriending services, not just for the elderly, but people of all ages. We can make a difference in our communities when it comes to all of our mental health in our workplaces. I mean, I've led the campaign called Where's Your Head At, which is supported by Bauer Media and Graptu magazine, to have mental health first aiders in large workplaces in the same way that we do have physical health first aiders. These are practical things that could make a difference and that we don't do at the moment. And I hope that if we have a Lib Dem majority government, that's a difference that we could make. And if we don't, those are the things that I will continue to advocate for.
I know how tiring this is, campaigning and also speaking for a living. I can assure you it takes a lot of energy, even if it doesn't look it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you, Maajid.
Thank you very much.
I'm sure you'd share all our thanks for Luciana and Maajid coming to talk. It's a wonderful, engaging meeting. So
thank you.
Very much.
Thank you so much.
Mike's off.